morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where the movie industry is in full panic mode. There are some fascinating things happening behind the scenes right now, which we'll discuss today in stories 2 and 3. But there is one bright spot still in the film industry, and that's Marvel Studios, or more specifically, the Avengers 2, which made a big splash yesterday with the reveal of Ultron and a couple of other set photos from the film. This is on the cover of Entertainment Weekly's Comic-Con preview, and if Marvel Studios is willing to divulge this information and these visuals now ahead of Comic-Con, what must they be saving for Hall H? It really does make the imagination run in high gear. So that in and of itself is fascinating. But like I did for the Mad Max photos, I want to go through these photos one by one with you. There are 8, and then there's the cover, just so we can discuss probably one of the most anticipated movies of all time. Some of you might be like, Grace, that's total hyperbole. But I don't think so. And it's not only anticipated by fans, but considering how this summer's box office is going, Hollywood needs this movie too. All right, so let's take a look at this cover first. And this is just fascinating. There are so many things going on here with these photos, not just in terms of the movie itself, but also Marvel Studios, the politics there, and what's going on with the characters jockeying for position. For instance, look who's on this cover. Now, of course, your eye is immediately drawn to Ultron, and I would say right away, James Spader has his work cut out for him, providing emotion for this face. Not a lot of movement here, if at all, I would think, so no wonder they need such a distinctive voice. He probably doesn't maybe even need to do that much motion capture, especially not in the face, because he's just going to have to be extra expressive with his body movements. So that's a very interesting choice right there. But then look who's in front of him. Of course, Robert Downey Jr. is there, and you can totally see where I'm going with this. But Robert Downey Jr. is there because he's Iron Man, the crown jewel of Marvel Studios, their cinematic universe. He's paid quite a bit of money, an undisclosed sum, to star in Avengers 2 and 3. He has no more Iron Man films on the horizon, so expect him to have a very large role here. But then instead of Thor, or maybe Black Widow, you have Captain America next to him. So Chris Evans is already reaping the rewards of a spectacular box office performance for his sequel. He went from being a member of the team where everyone's like, do we have to have him? Is it necessary to keep him around? To being, I think, one of the stars. And that's just a fascinating development, and really kudos to the not only the people in front of the camera for Winter Soldier, but those behind it, Joe and Anthony Russo, for elevating this character to really where he's never been. I mean, some of you might argue, well, I've always loved Captain America comics, but let's face it, to the public, to the mainstream, Captain America has always been a nice idea, but not a particularly popular one. But that's all changing, thanks to a spectacular political thriller that came out this summer. And I think a lot of people feel has yet to be matched by any other film. Maybe Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but that to be on the same level as that film, which is considered quite sophisticated and intelligent, is a victory in and of itself. And also, I think Cap's costume, everyone gets a little bit of a tweak here, and I think Cap, not only does he look a little bit more superhero-y and a little cooler, I've always felt that he should go more with the costume that he donned when Bucky was actually the official Captain America, when Captain America was working for S.H.I.E.L.D. And he kind of had that a little bit in Captain America the Winter Soldier. But, you know, every movie, because they're new toys, you need a new costume. But the other thing that interests me here is that Chris Evans himself looks bulkier. His chin, I mean, it's almost as if they photoshopped Chris Evans' features on a much bulkier, roided out individual. So I find that very interesting. He also looks a little older. This is just not the Chris Evans I think we're used to seeing. So I'm wondering, I think it's a Photoshop effort done here, because in the next photo he looks a little bit more like his regular self. But that's interesting they feel they need to Photoshop him in that manner, especially because when we see the movie, he won't look that way. But I love this photo, and I really think that Chris Evans has earned his spot there, and so I'm very excited for him. And Robert Downey Jr. better watch out, because it looks like they might finally have somebody who could take over for him if he does decide to leave this franchise, which he'd be crazy to do in my opinion, but we'll see. But Ultron, very interesting, and of course we have to comment on the little baby Ultrons behind him, which are, and they're blue, clearly, leader is red, and it'll be very interesting to see if those can be used effectively. Sometimes, that can just dilute your villain, but we'll see. I like it a lot, but as I said, James Spader has his work cut out for him. So let's dive into these pictures. All right, so here you can get a little bit of a better look at Chris Evans' costume. It does make him look wider just in the way it's designed. You see that the torso design is kind of pointing outward. The star draws attention to his shoulders. It's really meant to make him look a lot bulkier. I guess they're like, Chris Evans has gotten as big as he can get, but it's not big enough. He's even making Chris Hemsworth look a little tiny behind him, but maybe then, of course, Chris Hemsworth is feeling a little feminine these days. Of course, you've heard the news that Thor, at least in the comics, is going to be now a woman. Not Thor turns into a woman, but some woman takes over for him. And there he is, stuck standing behind Chris Evans. When your movie doesn't do as well, you have to go stand in the back. And also, I have to say, I notice these things, and I think a lot of other viewers do as well, particularly female and anyone who's a fan of these, Loki and Thor. They've always been quite well known for the quality of their hair, and I think that Thor is in desperate need of a shampoo here. But I think this looks good, and again, Chris Evans is looking more Chris Evans-y here, but again, he does look a little boxier in the face. I think that's interesting. But I think he looks a little older and a little more of a leader. I think it's a very interesting situation. He even almost looks like he has a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow there. But I'm very curious in the evolution of this character. He looks very cool. I like the little mock turtleneck he's got going on there. This is a person I think that finally seems like he could lead the team, whereas he was just kind of the know-it-all Boy Scout that told on everybody in the first Avengers. I remember him yelling at Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, and you're like, go away, Captain America. Nobody likes you. Not the case anymore. Now our next photo is a set photo of Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. These are our new characters. They're very hotly anticipated. But, with the popularity of Captain America and Robert Downey Jr. in his Iron Man role, and I think also Scarlett Johansson is getting a lot of push off of Lucy. I think that's really going to raise her profile as well as an action heroine, and of course the work she did in The Winter Soldier. So Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen really do have their work cut out for them to stand out in this crowd. I also kind of wish that their costumes would match a little bit. One of them is like preppy athlete, run past you on the street. We all know that look. I like those thumb shirts myself. I'm like, where do you shop, Quicksilver? You look fantastic. And then, of course, his sister, we don't know if they're related in this movie. Clearly, they're changing a lot of elements of these characters to allow them to even be qualified for Marvel's use. Some discussion they'll be Inhumans, turned into Inhumans, but Scarlet Witch is a lot more goth. I still believe firmly she's going to offshoot into the Doctor Strange movie. Maybe he'll be training her, and I think that would be a great way to raise the profile of that movie. So I feel, Doctor Strange to team up with Scarlet Witch. We'll see if maybe that's something that's announced at Comic-Con, because of course I think people are going to want to know what their plans are for the Scarlet Witch going on, and I think it worked to great effect to the Winter Soldier to have so many of the other characters from the Avengers join the fun. Of course, I'm talking about Nick Fury and Black Widow, of course. So I think that that's what's going to happen here. I have no idea where Quicksilver is going to go. Maybe he and Hawkeye are going to go hang out off camera somewhere. Awesome. But, we'll get to Hawkeye in a moment. He seems to be have his profile up a little bit too, because sometimes the squeaky wheel does get the grease. And as you might recall, Jeremy Renner was very vocal about not getting enough screen time or attention in the first Avengers. So I think they look pretty good here. This is a set photo. As opposed to, I believe it's a set photo, whereas the other ones seem more like they're taken from the film, or at least have more of that feel to them. So we'll see. I'm not sure. I like these characters, but I feel the Avengers is pretty crowded as it is, and I would maybe perhaps want to spend the time fleshing out the characters that are still there, and of course their villain. But also, the Scarlet Witch has quite the history, as I've discussed in detail before in various episodes here on Think About the Ink. She has quite the history with Ultron and robots, so maybe that's why she's there. Next up, I love this photo, and I think it clearly shows that Joss Whedon and Marvel Studios are aware of the popularity of science bros. That, of course, is the term for Bruce Banner and Tony Stark, best friends forever, best science friends forever, and I'm glad to see they're continuing to work together here. I think if they were going to make a Hulk movie, I think that's where maybe Tony Stark might want to consider going. I don't know if you can continue to make standalone films at this point where a character is truly solo. I think you need a couple Avengers to break off in different directions. I think it's going to be much more satisfying to the audience. But they look great here. Bruce Banner has on his typical lab coat. Robert Downey Jr., don't roll that way. He doesn't wear that. It's after Labor Day. He can't wear it. So, but I like it a lot, and I'm very excited to see what Mark Ruffalo is going to deliver here. We talked yesterday about how Andy Serkis is helping him with his Hulk performance, but I think a big part of what Mark Ruffalo brings to the table is how good a job he does as Bruce Banner. I want to see Bruce Banner, and I'll be very disappointed if this is just the Hulk, all the time. Let's move on to the next one here. We have Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. Loved her work so much in the first Avengers. Loved her work in Captain America the Winter Soldier. I think a lot of people did. People are crying out for a solo movie for her. And I think that's why Lucy is getting so much attention, because people are just treating that as kind of like a de facto Black Widow movie. I think it's fascinating that Joss Whedon has gone back to the hair that he chose. He's like, whatever you want to do, Joe and Anthony Russo, I don't care with your long, straight, blown out hair. My Black Widow has this short, curly cut, which I really like. I think it's very female-friendly and a very smart choice by Joss Whedon. Because, of course, I think Scarlett Johansson is going to look beautiful no matter what you do. She's going to look very attractive, but I think this makes her look more pragmatic. Who runs around in the field with long hair? And I think it just makes her seem a little more accessible. So, great choice, and I really continue to become an increasingly larger fan of Scarlett Johansson's work in just the action arena, but particularly for what she's bringing to the table as Black Widow. Also, you can see her suit. There are rumors that she's going to have a Black Widow's sting, an electric charge that runs through her suit. Black Widow, make sure you don't get too much radiation. Talk about wearing a cell phone being dangerous enough. I'm concerned about an entire bodysuit that has electricity pulsing through it. But I think, she still has her trademark gun. It's an action pose. I think she looks great. And I think, again, it's delivering the sex appeal that's necessary to appeal to that demographic, while as, again, she's a very well-realized female character, and I really applaud. I hope that Wonder Woman is as well-realized and as well-rounded as this character in terms of her appeal to multiple demographics and genders. So great work with Scarlett Johansson, and I'm very excited, and I hope she has an increased role in this film. Although I thought it was very funny, I don't know if you've seen these set photos, that she has a male stand-in for her on a motorcycle. They did the same thing in Transformers with Li Bingbing, and I guess those shots have to be pretty far away, but I would think there would be a female stunt performer who could ride the motorcycle. For instance, Anne Hathaway's stunt performer in The Dark Knight Rises was a female on of course, the Bat Pod. Why was she on the Bat Pod? Oh, I wanted Batman on there. All right, but anyway, that's it. I think that Catwoman, I liked Anne Hathaway's Catwoman. I just don't like Anne Hathaway personally. I think Anne Hathaway does not work very hard to appeal to everyone. All right, let's get back to the Avengers. Next up, here we go, Hawkeye. Winter Hawkeye. It's interesting to see all these costume changes, in the service of toy lines, because there's been a lot of stories recently about how these toys just aren't selling, because people aren't duped anymore by, oh, this Hawkeye has a coat on. They're like, I would like an action figure for a different character, please. So hopefully this is just to make him look cool. And he does look cool. It's a little Bourne, the latest Bourne film. I think the Bourne Ultimatum, right? I forget I think they were different Bourne names. Oh, but whatever, the last one. But I think Jeremy Renner, I'm excited for him here. He's really working hard. You'll see him in another photo in a moment. He really wants that upped profile. There is some speculation that perhaps they would just fire him for being so vocal in a negative manner, but they have not, and it seems to have worked. So don't be surprised if other characters in these movies start complaining, because it seems to be effective. I just keep thinking every time I see Mark Ruffalo of Jeremy Renner, every time I see him, I think of that great SNL sketch where he's like, I'm out of arrows, guys, I'm going to go wait in the van. And I thought that was just really well done. But he seems to have a lot of arrows there. I like the way his arrow, it changed arrows, electronically in the first movie. So let's see if it continues to have cool toys like that here. But he really needs to step up his game. There's no reason why Black Widow would be so popular. She's supposed to be at the same level that he is, and he wouldn't as well. So let's see if this movie can accomplish that. But again, he looks cool in his coat. All right, let's move on here. I also think he has the same color scheme. It looks like S.H.I.E.L.D. has added maroon to their color scheme of their uniforms. They're like, the black, it's too X-Men-y, it's too Matrix-y, let's add a little color. So kudos to the design department there. All right, so let's move on to this group photo. This is very exciting because look who's there! Don Cheadle! A number of people were like in the first Avengers, where the heck is War Machine? So I don't know if he's just going to drop by and have a brewski, whatever he's drinking there, but apparently he is going to show up, and I think that's wonderful. I think Nick Fury, you'll see in a moment, has kind of been considered a member of the Avengers. He got a great action sequence in Captain America the Winter Soldier, but they do need a little more diversity on the team, and I think people would like to see Black Panther, but maybe this is a nice short-term fix. And of course, I think Don Cheadle certainly deserves to be there. Is he helping Tony Stark out or not? And also, they kind of have to factor him in. Maybe it's a contract obligation because, as I said, there are no more Iron Mans on the horizon. So who knows how many Don Cheadle has signed up for? And they're like, well, he's just sitting there. We have to utilize him. So this is great. And of course, who's here? Not Thor, but Captain America, who had the box office win, and then the guy who complained is behind him. So very interesting to see how things are working out over behind the scenes at Marvel. Although you can see Mjolnir in the foreground there. So Mjolnir's like, yo, Thor, let's take a break. I want to just go and have my own career. Also, that's like looks like some kind of samurai kind of costume in the back there. I wonder if it has anything to do with the Mandarin. I don't know. You can't read too much into the set design. I mean, you can, but you'll just go crazy. But I like it quite a bit. And maybe this is the break room at the new Avengers Tower, which of course is the old Stark Tower. All right, so let's move over next to the next photo. Of course, Joss Whedon got one of himself in there. He's like, hey, don't forget who made this all happen. And he's with Scarlet Witch, obviously a very important character to him. He really wants to bring her in. He wanted to Saoirse Ronan for the role. She turned it down, which is insane. And so Elizabeth Olsen is stepping up to the plate. Here's hoping she can deliver. And then, of course, Jeremy Renner is there behind her. So let's move on. I like this photo, next one, quite a bit. I think this is a great coup for the publicity department and just shows they're very creative and clever over there at Disney and Marvel Studios, and they have a great sense of, making history. And I think that movies really need to pay attention to that. You shouldn't just be thinking about what you're making now. You should be like, this needs to last for a long time. People need to look at this fondly. What's the DVD cover going to look like? What's it going to look like when it plays on TV in 10 years? And I think Joss Whedon does have that in mind. And as you can see, so does his publicity department. And I just think this is a phenomenal shot, really phenomenal shot of these costumes sitting here in a row. And also, look, there you go again, Captain America right behind Iron Man. So you can kind of see, I guess, in the degrees of importance here, which is just fascinating. You have Iron Man, of course, up front, then Captain America, thanks to his box office. Also, you can see he has an Avengers logo, not an American flag or a star on Captain America's arm. Very interesting. I think they have to make that character move away from that perhaps a little bit if they want him to have global appeal, which his sequel, certainly did. Then there's Thor, because he is part of Marvel's Trinity. That's what a lot of people are calling it right now. And then some people, that's why they're saying they don't mind Thor maybe being female for a while to get a female member in there. But, don't divide your attention, Marvel. Focus on bringing up Black Widow to the character she needs to be. And, of course, there she is right behind Thor, which is great. Then Hulk, of course. I guess that's just his pants. That's hilarious. And then Hawkeye behind that. And Hawkeye seems to have two costumes there, it looks like. Hawkeye's got both his short sleeve and his jacket behind it. And then, of course, Nick Fury. We don't see Nick Fury in any of these photos, but I hope that he is a big part of the movie. I'm a big fan of what Samuel L. Jackson is doing with the character. And I think, as I said, he had a great action sequence in the sequel for Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and I think that he should continue to be utilized in that manner. Maybe they'll bring in his son at some time, just the way they've done it in the comics. But I think Samuel L. Jackson can deliver, and there's no reason to go younger. All right, so that's the first story of the day. What do you think of these photos, and what do you think they might have Marvel Studios might have in store for Comic-Con if they're giving out this much information ahead of the game? Also, it might just be jockeying for position to get people very excited about that, excited about the Hall H presentation, because they have so much competition from the other studios. All right, so let's move into those behind-the-scenes stories. They're going to kind of be combined today. As you can see, this is turning into a very long episode. We, of course, have a viewer question. So the two stories are about what's happening to the movie industry behind the scenes in terms of movies versus television. Now, the big story, of course, that's been brewing this week that a number of you have asked me to comment on is Fox wants to buy Warner Brothers. One studio wants to buy another. You thought Disney buying Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar was crazy. Well, Rupert Murdoch wants to go and buy an entire studio. Not just a studio, but Time Warner. And he'd have to sell off CNN. There's been a lot of speculation about that because he already has the Fox News channel. And of course, CNN is not doing very well in the ratings these days, so it's not really a commodity anyway. So what does Rupert Murdoch want? Why does he want to buy Warner Brothers, Time Warner, what does he want there? Some people might speculate that he wants the movies, the movie division. Warner Brothers is doing very well at the box office these days. Not quite as well as Fox, but still. And of course, they have the DC Comics films. And people have been joking they're going to get a Batman-Wolverine crossover before a Wolverine-Spider-Man or Avengers crossover. And I wonder if they could do that. I wonder if there's anything in the contract stipulating how these characters can be used in what regard, and what other characters they can meet, and when we're in the crossover happy days of movie making. But he doesn't want, Rupert Murdoch does not want Time Warner for their film division. He wants it for their TV division, and also just for their content at large. And why? He wants it as muscle. So here's your real life Lex Luthor. I guess maybe Warner Brothers would be a good fit with Murdoch. He wants to combine the might of Fox and Warner Brothers to bully other industries and other people they're interacting with. Who? Well, first off, he wants to be able to have a lot of leverage when negotiating fees to cable providers, people who provide you television. As you can see, there's been a lot of mergers there, and you've seen a lot of arguments where channels are blacked out while they're negotiating fees, etc. And so Rupert Murdoch feels that if he has so much content, if he has Fox, the Fox News channel, and he also has HBO and TNT and I believe TBS. TBS. He can really strong arm these cable providers into giving him the rates that he wants. He also wants to be able to provide streaming services to compete with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and the like. Just as HBO Go is so successful as an app, he wants to maybe do that for all of his channels and create and to have all that content, those hot Warner Brothers, Time Warner channels and the Fox channels, because he has, of course, all the FX and Fox networks, which are doing very well in addition. Then, of course, he wants to consolidate the sports angle. He's trying to build his own sports channel to compete with ESPN, and it just turns out that Time Warner owns a lot of broadcast rights to, I believe, college basketball and a couple of other sports that are very lucrative. Now, the other thing that he wants to do is because you're seeing something about TV and digital content. Well, a lot of people aren't going to the movies these days, which we'll discuss in just a moment for the third story. But Rupert Murdoch wants to take all of this might, the Warner Brothers and Fox movies, and he wants to go to the theaters and strong arm them into making it a smaller window between when a movie hits theaters and when it goes to be available on your devices. So right now you have about a 3-month window. He wants to make it even shorter. And Jeffrey Katzenberg has talked about this, and we've discussed Katzenberg's theory that eventually you'll pay for size. You'll pay for either a small, tiny little version on your phone, something on your iPad or TV, and then the movie price. I think that's a big problem for theaters, but I think that, of course, in these discussions, nobody is bringing up the fact that the theater experience is so hit or miss these days. And I think people aren't willing to pay a lot of money for a value that isn't guaranteed. Not just in terms of the quality of the content they're watching, but the experience of actually watching the film. So if this does begin to happen, and the people say Murdoch will try again, even though his original bid for Time Warner was rejected, and he might succeed. I think he put something in the 80s for an $88 or $86 price tag on the stock. They're saying he might come back at 100. So he wants to so he might actually do this. So I'm hoping that this might make movie theaters step up their game to try and entice people to go to the theater and be a little more responsible in policing people on their phones, talking, and just making a mess of the theater and cleaning it up, from everything from the theater to the restrooms to the lobby. It really is quite horrible. So I think that's very interesting. That's our second story of the day, and I'm curious to what you guys think of this. Is this the beginning of the end or a dawn of a new exciting age? Or will you have to wait and see and find out? And also, where's the government in all this? Aren't these like antitrust purchases? But we'll see. Then the third story was discussed in the Hollywood Reporter yesterday, is that the box office is really taking a dive, and Hollywood is increasingly nervous about the fact that their dependable audience of young males just simply are not going to the movies. Their theory is, Hollywood's theory is that they're playing video games, watching YouTube, and also perhaps there's just a disconnect between the tastes of the people making movies and the audience at this point. I also would factor in television there. Game of Thrones, there's just such great content on the small screen, and Hollywood has always feared the small screen, and it finally looks like those fears are being realized. So I think the quality of television is also a problem. And of course, Hollywood never blames themselves for maybe not making the best movies. I've been talking to some people about this summer, and I think a lot of the consensus has been, at least people that I've spoken to, is that while there have been some very good movies, nothing's really been quite as good as they expected, and a lot of stuff was just good enough. And again, Captain America is responsible for raising that bar so high. That might be partially responsible as well. But the other interesting development is that women are becoming the big, dependable movie-going base that Hollywood is you're going to see them start to turn to. I think Hollywood and Asia, fascinating developments. Of course, foreign box office in general is very important in Hollywood, but they can't get the kind of numbers they can get out of Asia, which are often comparable to what they're getting out of the US, or greater sometimes. But look at the success of Frozen and Maleficent. Those movies were powered to their box office heights because of female moviegoers. Now, of course, a lot of guys here have said, I went to see those movies too, thank you, but how many times did you go to see them? I think that's the big question. Are you going multiple times? Also, did you buy any merchandise related to those films? That's another factor. And also, did you go by yourself, or did some woman tell you she wanted to, female of any age, tell you she wanted to go and you went with her? It's all a very interesting situation. And of course, I think women are driving the Hunger Games franchise, and of course, The Fault in Our Stars, which made an initial box office splash. As I said, and many of you have also corroborated, when you went to the theater, it was almost all women. So that's just a fascinating development in the way TV is changing. Movies are changing because of TV, and I think it's fascinating that the film industry will not acknowledge that it's television and will not acknowledge that it's largely a quality issue. So we'll see what happens, but I'm curious to what your theories are, if you've noticed this, and how do you feel about the future of filmmaking. All right, so let's get on to today's viewer question. And this is from Grace Rodriguez. Grace says, "Hi Grace, I have a question." Smiley face. It seems like the USA trailer, she's talking about Big Hero 6, by the way. This week, a Big Hero 6 trailer came out for the United States, and then an international Japanese trailer came out. Very different trailers. You can check out both online. I'll try and put links at the end here. So it seems like the USA trailer focuses more on laughs, while the Japanese trailer of Big Hero 6 focuses more on the story. Recently, I read a news article that one of the reasons How to Train Your Dragon 2 wasn't performing as it was expected is because the trailers were weak on laughs. So while the Japanese market regards animation greatly, aimed at all, not only kids, and looks forward to great stories, could it be that the American market still sees animation as a kid's thing, and so to convince parents to accompany their children, the movies must at least seem funny to them? I remember that the first Frozen trailer also focused on Olaf and Sven for laughs, if I'm not mistaken. Excellent question, Grease, and great analysis. And I think that's true. I think there are definitely different tastes for different movie-going audiences, and I think the consensus with the marketing in Hollywood seems to be that audiences want laughs. And I guess that's been validated by what's happened with How to Train Your Dragon. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is a very serious film, and it's a little bit of a dark film, which I think is we can all attest to who've seen it. It goes to some dark places, and I think a number of us liked that about the film, and think it's important to really reach for that epic quality that so many of us enjoy. But how many of us? Apparently not enough, because while How to Train Your Dragon 2 certainly isn't a box office bomb, it's not performing as strong as it should have, and certainly in comparison to other animated films. So it's an interesting situation. I think that American audiences are, they can go for the darker stuff, the more serious stuff. I think a lot of what makes Elsa so popular is her internal struggle. But I think that they expect to have a little bit of fun, a little bit of lightheartedness. You'll see the same situation not going on for blockbusters. Live-action blockbusters also try to have funny elements in their trailers as well. I think for a while people are trying to appeal to the Nolan fan base. I think that's why you saw the way Godzilla was cut, that trailer, and that's really Legendary's wheelhouse. But other things, people want to get the laughs in. I think you're also seeing the comedies are doing very well this summer. People want to laugh, and I think a comedy is a little bit of a surer bet, and I think people feel at the very least they'll have a good time. They feel a little more comfortable with the odds of having a good time seeing a comedy. Comedies are the hot ticket this summer. More so than blockbusters, and they're certainly cheaper to make. I also wouldn't say it's just funny. I think it's energy. American audiences really like a lot of energy, and I think it might be an economic issue. A lot of you have pointed at this as well. I think people want a full-bodied experience if they're going to pay to go to a theater here in the United States. I think overseas, movies are becoming more popular. They're on the rise. It's a new thing. They have a lot more focus. One of you actually wrote the other day that that Frozen has made Western animation quite popular in Japan. I thought that was a fascinating development, and that it's more popular than ever before, and Japanese audiences are actually turning away from their own homegrown animation industry to the West, and that there's a big demand for Disney animation. So Big Hero 6 might be poised perfectly to capitalize on that, which would be just brilliant timing, if maybe accidental. So I think that, going to the movies is still a little bit of a novelty. It's still exciting. It's a great experience still. But as for all the reasons I just detailed, talking about the movie business's problems with audiences and going against television, there's a problem here in the United States. So if people don't feel they're going to get a lot of action and a lot of laughs and a lot of excitement, they can wait to watch it at home. I think that's really the issue. That the trailer needs to tell people this is worth all the money and time it's going to cost to see it in theaters. So that's really, I think, what's going on there. And I think that these trailers obviously are very effective. Frozen's initial trailers worked, and Olaf is very popular. And I think that maybe it's nice to have both. I think that maybe I wouldn't lose the laughs, but I do think the focus on story is nice. But perhaps with Frozen, people will just be pleasantly surprised when they go to the theater, and it will ensure good word of mouth, not just from critics, but also, of course, from audience members who see it the first weekend, who can go and tell people, say, well, it's not only funny, but it's a great story. So that's my opinion on that, Grace. Great observation, as I said. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.